Hi, I'm Max Forsyth, founder and managing director of Search and Selection, the specialist in-house communications executive search and recruitment firm based in the UK, covering the UK and US markets, and also host of our Comms Coffee Club podcast, where we interview the best and brightest brains within the in-house communications industry from across global companies and industries. And we get to learn about them, what makes them tick, their insights, and some of the favourite CEOs and communications campaigns they've worked on. Unfortunately, the last couple of our guests have been struck down with COVID, so they're unable to interview this week on the pod. So, bringing you something very special, we're flipping things around. And I'm going to be in the interview seat, and the wonderful Arabella will be interviewing me instead. We'll be discussing all things Search and Selection, the Comms Coffee Club podcast, why I set it up, what my vision is for it, and some of the best campaigns and best comms people that I've worked with over the years, either with them as a candidate or as a client, or indeed some of the previous interviewees on the Comms Coffee Club podcast. So, I hope you enjoy. Don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube or follow the podcast on your favourite podcast app. And if you do get a moment as well, feel free to check out our Patreon channel, which is Comms Coffee Club podcast on Patreon. And for just £5 a month, you will get early access to each episode. You'll get bonus content as well, exclusive insights and early access to Search and Selection's face-to-face Comms Coffee Club events as well, which are always great fun and everyone really looks forward to. So please do check them out, and let's get on with the episode.
Welcome everyone to another episode of the Comms Coffee Club podcast. I'm Isabella, your host for today, as we're in for a special treat. We have none other than your regular host, Max Forsyth, the managing director and founder of Comms Search and Selection, in the hot seat. Max, welcome to your own podcast. Let's dive in. Max, can you briefly tell us about yourself and what drove you to set up Comms Search and Selection?
I'm Max Forsyth, 7 and a bit years of in-house communications recruitment experience. Like everyone, if you know any other recruiters, very few, in fact, I'd say nobody grows up and says, I'm going to be a recruiter. It's very much a career that people tend to fall into. I'll keep this as short as I possibly can. Went to university down in Brighton, studied sports journalism, which I loved. I didn't honestly really know what I wanted to do when I left school, but rather than revising for my A levels, I just really enjoyed watching, listening, and playing sport. So, I thought I would, kind of match that with a sports journalism degree down in Brighton. Didn't realise at first that the campus was actually in Eastbourne, which is about 20 miles along the south coast from Brighton. For anyone listening who doesn't know Eastbourne itself, so Brighton, very cool city, very arty, lots of entertainment, great place to be a student, lots on, really cool. Eastbourne, it's one of the sunniest places in the UK, but it has a reputation for being something of a retirement village down by the sea. So, not exactly what you'd think of if you were to think of a sort of roaring and raving student town. But anyway, finished that. To be brutally honest, a lot of journalism at that point was going down the social media route. Didn't particularly interest me writing tweets all day. I really wanted to do long form, but that was very hard to get into, and I just didn't fancy working for the Surrey Comet for 14 or 12 grand a year, whatever it was at the time. And then went through a couple of other jobs, and I was living with a housemate who said, why don't you give recruitment a go? So I thought, why not? went across to Morgan Hunt, which is a sort of well-established public sector recruiter. Did 6 months there, realised that I enjoyed recruitment, wasn't particularly a big fan of recruiting public sector membership body side of things. So role came up at EMR, and then spent 5.5 years there building out the communications recruitment team, which I absolutely loved. And then went across to LHH for 6 months, which used to be Knock and Clock, and then decided to set up on my own. So Comsearch and Selection was born. Why did I choose it? Well, one, I love my job. I love communications. I think it doesn't really matter whether you're going to set a business up or you're going to work in something. I think you genuinely have to enjoy what you do. Otherwise, it becomes very hard work very quickly. So I knew I loved the job. I had a bit of savings. Thought I would, give sort of running my own shop a go. Really wanted maybe not necessarily responsibility, but more ownership of the decision making process, and being able to do my own thing. So, and then I felt a lot of communications recruiters in the UK. There are lots of smaller boutique agencies like an EMR, for example, or you get the larger, more established brands like a Michael Page, Hayes, Robert Walters, who they might do communications, but they'll do it as part of like a marketing and communications recruitment team. And generally speaking, because communications is a smaller function than marketing, a lot of the focus from a marketing perspective from the agencies side of things tends to be more on the marketing side and less on the communication side. So with that, I felt there was a real gap in the market to really go after the in-house communications piece, because there aren't that many people out there that do it. VMA is probably the longest standing brand, and is the communications version of EMR, if EMR is the sort of leading marketing brand. But even VMA have started to branch out, and they've got sort of marketing desk, digital, etc. So I felt there was a real gap for the in-house communications world. I think if you look at some other, the smaller, sort of boutique comms recruitment agencies that obviously have been around a few more years than we have, because they're only 5.5 months old. Even then, a lot of them tend to focus on the internal communications, change communication side of things. But I really wanted to be able to cover everything here. So, it's the corporate communications, it's the external communications, PR, media relations, as well as the internal comms and change comms, so that, a chief communications officer or a comms director can come to me and use Comsearch and Selection as a reason for a sort of one-stop shop really for all of their different recruitment needs within their team. And also, frankly, from a quality and excellence and value perspective, I also really felt there was space for someone to do things really, really, really well, and be consultative, offer those extra insights, which we're doing with the podcast, blogs. We've got the Comms Coffee Club newsletter, which people can subscribe to either via our website or LinkedIn, by the way. And really talk about those issues and the latest trends and what people within communications would find useful and of value from us. I think a lot of recruitment agencies, doesn't really matter what sector they're in, spend a lot of time talking about, we've done a placement here, or, here's another salary survey or another market report. Fine. It's kind of interesting. Some of it's useful. Some of it, I honestly don't think a lot of in-house clients are that bothered. But it's all very samey. So again, wanted to do something different, stand out from the crowd. So so that's why we're here.
What's your long-term vision for Comsearch and Selection?
Yeah, it's a great question. Vision. where do I want the business to get to? I'd like to be I'd like to be the leading and most trusted in-house communications recruitment brand. Uh, yeah, as and also, what are we going to measure that by? That's an interesting one. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily need to be the largest at all, but reputationally wise, it's interesting, isn't it? 'Cause obviously, being a comms recruiter, particularly for the corporate comms and PR people, reputation is such an important part of their role within their business or their company. But yeah, reputationally wise, I really want people to think of us as comm search and selection, you know, one really damn good at the job, and they get us great candidates, or I can get a candidate, or we can get a candidate a new role. And everyone talks about service excellence, don't they? But yeah, really holding people's hands through that process, making sure that candidates are properly briefed on roles, properly briefed before interviews. We go the extra mile in terms of that interview prep, doing a lot of their research for them. They're busy people. Comms people, comms teams are, historically and still, under resourced. In my opinion, I think if you look at, you take so many businesses and you look at the size of the marketing team and the marketing budget, compared to the size and the budget of most communications teams, and then you look at the value those two teams generate, the business wins, the reputational sort of defense, the employee engagement, linking it back to retention rates, etc. Comms teams offer unbelievable value, but of course it means that comms people are time poor, and they're often putting in a lot of extra hours. So yeah, whatever we can do as a recruitment agency to make their lives easier, make them interview better, or help them interview better rather, yeah, it's a win-win. The candidates happier, the clients happier because they have they have people that interview really well. The clients also happier because they end up hiring someone who's really taken the time and been coached really well, so that they can seamlessly integrate into that new organization. And we're happy, obviously, because we get the recruitment fee for it, right? So that's my long-term vision. Clearly from a practical perspective, we'll grow. I've been very careful. I haven't sought outside investment. I don't want to do that. I don't want the business to be sort of heavily debt leveraged. Whether interest rates are where they are at the moment or whether they were low, I wanted growth to really be organic and almost to reflect, the organic growth and the earned status and earned growth that in-house comms teams do, compared to you know spending tons of money on SEO and paid campaigns, right? So that's my vision.
Wonderful vision indeed. Now, turning to the podcast. What inspired you to create the Comms Coffee Club podcast?
One, I love podcasts. I've got really into my podcasts. Actually, it was more of a COVID thing, I think, more than anything. Going out for, when we were only allowed an hour's exercise a day. God, those rules were just ridiculous, weren't they? But being able to, go for a walk or go for a bike ride, and put a podcast on and listen to that, I just got really, really into it. I listen to all sorts of podcasts now, from podcast on sort of topical insights, some business insights, right the way through to comedy, random podcasts as well about all sorts of stuff. They're great. They're really interesting. I really love the ability. The audio format is great. Also, being able to watch stuff on YouTube or have it on in the background, in the office sometimes, like on the TV behind me. It's yeah, it's just engaging, and it's almost a bit like having the radio on, except they get a bit deeper into subjects and topics rather than the very quick sort of snippets you get on the radio, which I really like. And yeah, it also means that you can consume great content whilst you're busy doing something else. It doesn't just have to be a walk or a run or a bike ride. You can be you can be doing the ironing, you can be doing the washing up, or the gardening, mowing the lawn. Yeah, it's just a great, or even for for people that work in companies, on the commute, whether you drive to your office or you get the train or the tube to work, you can listen to a podcast and consume that just whilst you're sat there. It's actually much easier than having to actually manually scroll through an article or read a physical newspaper. Even if you're at your desk, not that I necessarily advise this, but you can always have one ear in and have a podcast, and then you've got your other ear free. So yeah, so I love them for that reason. And then why did I set up the Comms Coffee Club podcast? Um, Again, it goes back to the insights piece and offering something different for both candidates and hiring managers. Also, over the years doing this job, I've had some fascinating conversations with people. In-house communications people have some great, some fantastic insights, some great stories to tell as well, because of particularly the senior level, their closeness to the C-suite, the CEO. They're always one of the first to hear, or they're on top of issues, plans, etc. So they're right at the coalface of the really meaty stuff within a business. So I wanted to take those conversations and be able to share them with our audience. They're genuinely really interesting, some great stories, and I thought there was great value. I mean, not just value, but also just genuine interest and human interest in it.
You've spoken to some of the brightest minds in the business. What are some of the best communications campaigns that you've heard about during your interviews?
Yeah, so great campaigns during interviews or stories over the years. Loads, too many. I think some of the real standout ones. I think actually a really great one is probably from PwC, the comms team there. So PwC were the first of the big four firms to come out with their gender pay gap report in the UK in 2014. And yes, there was a content marketing campaign that went alongside it, but the PR campaign did a huge amount of work on pushing that. It got picked up by a lot of, not just trade, but national press, the FT, BBC, Telegraph, etc., etc. It was, don't want to get misquoted here, but I think it was front page on some of them. And yeah, and the amount of business that the managing partner for that area at PwC, won off the back of clients reading that stuff in the paper or listening to it on the radio, news, etc., was phenomenal. And I think that's a really great example of where communications on a proactive front can really drive that return on investment. So I think it can be difficult sometimes, can't it, for communications teams to be able to necessarily track some of that back and put it on a spreadsheet and put it in their board pack. It's unlike marketing or sort of the SEO conversion or website conversion. You can quite clearly track that, or even if you put you put a box on your inquiry form on your website, it will say where do you, let's take PwC, where did you hear about PwC, or and most people will probably have gone on their browser and gone to Google and typed in PwC, and a lot of people will just naturally then put Google, but actually that person, take the PwC gender pay gap report example, but that person could have, or that person's read that in the paper, or they've listened to it on the radio. then their next step was to go onto their laptop and Google PwC. So Google's not necessarily really the true answer. And actually, it was actually because a lot of the clients rang up the managing partner personally, so he could offer that. So he could offer that verbal feedback. But yeah, I think it's really important on that for comms teams to really be working in tandem with, okay, in a professional service environment, it's the partners, or in legal, it's the partners again, or the senior lawyers who will often be doing that business development. But if you're not in those firms, work with the sales team. If you're in funds or financial services, they call everyone distribution, don't they? Just a fancy word for sales. But you need to be really in tune and speaking to those people regularly so that you can pick up some of those snippets that's coming back from customers where they've read about something in the press or the thought leadership campaign you pushed out on LinkedIn, and then making sure that you're putting that back in your board packs. On the reactive and crisis communications point of things, I think actually, the episode 2 of the podcast with Kate Howell, who used to be the director of communications at Borough Market, that was a genuinely fascinating interview. And she, at the time, she was director of communications when it was the London Bridge terror attack in 2017. And that terror attack spilled into Borough Market, very sadly, claimed some lives. Kate at the time, she was on holiday in the US. So, she got the call when she was in a remote part of the US. She had to fly back to the UK on the next available flight. The crisis communications hub, it was about 4 of them in a room in a temporary office because obviously the police closed Borough Market. No one could get in there whilst they were doing all of their investigations, etc. Yeah, the importance of having that crisis communications plan in place. Clearly, that's an extreme example, but you need to have the nuts and bolts of that. The plan itself of if X happens, B, C, D, E. That bit tends to go out the window a little bit in that it's very fluid. Things will change, but it's things like having all the contact details of your staff members up to date, having that crisis cascade plan to make sure that you can contact all of your staff, make sure they're safe, find out where they are, etc., etc., etc. That stuff is really important. And yeah, you really need to listen to the episode because I think that is a fantastic example of unbelievably important but good crisis communications planning. Is really, really important. Multiple stories from across different businesses. By the way, I won't name the brands because I think crisis communications is a bit sensitive. But yeah, the amount of times where senior comms people have kept a negative story out of the press, which would have been incredibly bad for the business, the exco. By the way, they're not stopping anything illegal in the press. That's very different. But this is it's just business stuff that wouldn't be favourable to the brand or the business. And the importance of a really good comms leader to be able to do that can't be underestimated. Also on the internal side of things as well. I'm conscious I don't necessarily want to beat HR teams sort of with a stick here, but yeah, I think they can often be quite process driven, and let's say you're going through a restructure or a redundancy process. Sometimes it can be quite black and white. They get their spreadsheet up. Here are the salaries, here are the roles, here are the savings we need to make. Right, so these are the people that here. These are the ones that are staying. Let's just let's just tell everyone. Clearly you can't do it that way, and things like that need to be managed as compassionately as possible, and the reasons explained. Clearly there's also the legal piece behind it as well, so you need to make sure that legal are involved, counsel, as well as the comms team, to make sure that you're doing that one lawfully, but then from a communications perspective, getting that right so that bad news can be delivered in the best way possible. There's quite a few examples of that. And then finally, just to flip it back to the positive side of things, episode one with Elena Francis was another great example where, she was in New York, she was working for Swiss Re, the sales side of the business. They had a new product to launch, and yeah, she PR'd it. It took a long time, but that wasn't just the media relations piece. It was working in tandem with marketing and the events team, getting the sales team and the actuaries, round the table at dinners with journalists, doing that real relationship building with journalists, explaining what was quite a complex product to them, and then them being able to, tell that story, print it, etc. And I think it was the global head or the global director of distribution for that product called Elena into his office one day and said, Elena, what have you done? She was expecting to get a bollocking. She didn't, obviously, and they'd actually run out of product to be able to, sell to clients. So I think, again, that's another really good example of, where PR can be used from a positive perspective and really driving that return on investment. So yeah, definitely check out episode 1, 2, and then Wesley Earl as well, who was on episode 3. Great guy. He joined Natixis investment managers. When they were very much a mid-size investment and asset manager. They were an ex-client of his. Moved over to London, spent 10 years there. I think that's really interesting as well from a growth perspective for the business, supporting that from a communications perspective, both corporate, external, and internal, and how communications evolves, whether it's helping drive employee engagement, culture, new markets in new countries that you haven't worked in before, building that brand profile, that brand raising, also cultural nuances between it still it still amazes me. I find it quite fascinating how how much even between English speaking languages, so the UK and the US, for example, even that, how PR and media relations differs. Never mind if you're trying to do your corporate communications in London and then at the same time trying to build kind of build out the brand in South America or or Far East Asia. Three completely different cultural environments, three completely different investment environments, three completely different media environments, tone, language, legal as well, what you can say, what you can't say, how regulated an environment is. Again, that's a really interesting episode on on true global communications.
Truly remarkable campaigns there. Lastly, given the turbulent in house communications recruitment market continually evolving, what advice would you have for hiring managers and candidates currently?
So yeah, very very turbulent comms recruitment market. Yeah, very up and down. It's it's in fact it's impossible to predict where the market's going to go or necessarily what industries exactly. I think if you take a macro view, certainly in the UK and the US is quite similar to this. If you look at vacancy numbers across all sectors and all industries, so this isn't just communications, not just white collar stuff. It's literally everything. The post COVID boom, if you like, it peaked over a year ago. It peaked about 15 months ago, and then since then it's been on a downward trend there. Trend wise, not as steep or as sharp as COVID, when a lot of recruitment just stopped overnight, and certainly in communications, it was dead. I was at EMR at the time, and I was never furloughed, but looking back, may as well have just furloughed me for 4 to 6 months, because there really was not anything out there really. And actually, certainly in-house communicators were too busy doing communications. They were the first and last call of the day for most CEOs. Actually, I think that's been a good thing. Comms had a good pandemic in inverted commas, in that I think probably the majority of excos had seen it as a bit of a support function, but they get the strategic importance of it now, which is great. And I think long term that will really benefit communications. And I certainly think there needs to be more of a swing for communications and marketing in terms of headcount and where that budget is allocated. I haven't seen a huge amount of it yet, but there's macroeconomic things at the moment. It means it's difficult for a lot of companies to invest too much. Not as steep as COVID, probably similar actually really to 08, 09 if you look at the trends, and it should start to turn relatively soon on a macro level, as companies do those restructures, people that have been made redundant find new roles, a bit more scarcity of talent, more people leave, people go off sick leave. Vacancies will ride. It's very cyclical. It's just a case of when. The tech sector made a lot of cuts back end of last year and into the start of this year. There's been a few more shavings across the tech industry over the summer, but I think you may have seen the news last week. Even Salesforce have restarted hiring and have actually offered an olive branch back to those employees that they made redundant, a boomerang, as I think the headlines were calling it. Be interesting to see how many people take up that offer at Salesforce. So I think technology is probably turning a bit of a corner. I think also the VC funds, the PE funds, the institutional investors have they've realigned their portfolios, and I think with regards to the technology businesses, they've weeded out the businesses that weren't really viable or weren't ever really going to make a profit. They've sorted those out, and I think they're really backing the technology companies that genuinely do have a great product and can become profitable. Again, the AI space obviously has blown up, so that will need that will need communication people too. Financial services, generally speaking, it's been a bit of a slog all year, but it's not as bad as it was at the start. Obviously, the US, kind of the US banking crisis sort of accounted for a lot of that slowdown and its sort of ripple effect. What can hiring manager candidates do? I think, for candidates, the really obvious things, look at your LinkedIn profile, try and optimize that as much as possible. Make sure you've got the right job titles in terms of, your level. So, whether you're a head of or a director, VP in the States, AVP, make sure that's right. Don't put your entire CV on LinkedIn, but have a couple of bullet points under the roles for that extra bit of detail so that you get picked up in keyword searches. Make sure you've got a nice profile picture. Make sure you've got a headline. Make sure you've got a banner profile. Make sure you're networking. I think for a lot of people, particularly more senior people, have you reached out to your old network? Have you spoken to old bosses? People that were in your team that are now hiring managers, how they got anything going? Doesn't necessarily need to be permanent as well. Could be contract. I think again, also for contract, budgets are tight, right? So 5 days a week for a senior communicator, it might be a bit expensive for a lot of companies on a contract basis at the moment. Fine. Look at 3 days a week. I've spoken to lots of candidates where, they've been in process of roles that, really are paying a manager level day rate for 5 days. Well, okay, well, let's find something that suits everybody. If I work 3 days a week, that's my, that matches my day rate expectations, still fits your budget. You get someone more experienced, for 3 days. Actually, they can probably do, a more junior person's 5-day work in 3 days, and then it still gives that person a couple of days a week to do whatever, live, spend time with their children, interview for something more permanent as the market picks up. So I think kind of that's what candidates can do. Obviously work with work with good recruiters. I think recruitment isn't, there's no real, there's no huge amount of regulation to it. So very low barriers to entry. So, there are some great recruiters out there. There are also some crap recruiters. So yeah, so be selective, and lean on them for tips and advice. Don't go paying a recruitment coach, 1,500 quid or $3,000 to tell you how to sort your LinkedIn profile out and do a little bit of interview prep. A good recruiter, will do that for free. I'll do that for free. I don't mind spending half an hour on Google Meet with a good candidate. It's in my interests in that, hopefully some good client service. I can also potentially get a role for them, but even if they don't get the role through me, they'll probably be hiring again at some point in the future. Given some time for free, and hopefully you'd like to think that will come back, and I'll use us, when they're hiring. So, and then on the hiring manager side of things, hey, look, I think a lot of them have been quite lucky, this year, in that, for a lot of companies, as long as you've got an okay brand awareness, you can put an advert up on LinkedIn and you've been inundated with applications. I think that's definitely starting to turn a bit in terms of, grade A candidates just landing in their inbox. I think it's also important that, when it's a buyer's market like this and they've got choice, to still recognize the fact that candidates are also interviewing them as well as them interviewing candidates. So, little things like manners, asking how a candidate's day is going, all of that sort of stuff. Just, making things a bit personal, making them feel welcome, showing a bit of interest in them if you like them too. Never goes down badly. Then also, keeping processes moving, right? Time is a real killer at the moment, particularly for candidates who are unemployed or they're looking for a new contract. They just want to earn money. So, if you're taking weeks between processes, you're going to miss out on your preferred candidate. So, keep the momentum going, keep that going, and use hybrid, or use a hybrid interview process. Do your first interviews on Teams or Google Meet if you're not already. Save everyone time. Then I would advise, for most people, unless the role is completely remote, do an in-person interview as well. One, so you can sense check the candidate, but two, it helps build that rapport, right? Yeah, video calls only go so far. You see, you see the whites of someone's eyes, and often you have you build a better rapport, you have a better conversation, you get a bit of buy-in, so that when that offer comes and they've got a couple of other offers on the table, they go with you because you've taken the time to meet them, smile, you've sat down for a coffee, a cup of tea. Really little simple things like that, smiling, shaking someone's hand can make such a difference. So those would be my top tips and advice.
Thank you, Max. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you today, and I'm sure our listeners have found it insightful. And a final thanks to ChatGPT-4 for writing my interview questions. And that's a wrap, folks. Until next time, and if you couldn't tell already, this is Isabella, your host, signing off from the Comms Coffee Club podcast. Goodbye.
Thanks for having me too. Yeah, it's been great being in this chair and being interviewed. Yeah, I hope all the listeners and watchers have found it helpful and insightful. And yeah, kind of thanks to you. And yeah, thanks to ChatGPT as well for coming up with the questions for this. And we'll also be back next week with some more in-house comms experts and senior leaders. Once everyone's feeling a bit better with the COVID strain that's going around at the moment. So any questions that anyone's got off the back of this, of course, feel free to visit our website, which is Instagram, Twitter. Obviously, you can sign up to our Comms Coffee Club newsletter on LinkedIn, which goes out every Monday. If you just search Comms Search Selection, you'll find it on there. And also on our website as well, you can sign up for our mailing list too. So look forward to look forward to next week and getting next week's podcast out with a great in-house comms guest. And take care.